To me, this is the fault of the system failing the warrior. If you're going to send people into fire where your life is just at risk every moment, and then you're going to bring them back and say, well, you're out now, because that's what they told my generation. Just forget it all, what happened, and go on with your life. They told my whole generation that. It didn't work. We had a lot of suicides back in the 60s and 70s. It really bothers me that these guys don't get the proper treatment, and they kill themselves. 10 people I knew well, I had built files on them like this one. And many, many interviews, and then they die at their own hand because of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because doctors don't have the time, clinicians don't have the time, and the VA can't find enough money to take care of people, and then these guys do that. And a couple of years ago, I know you probably remember this young guy up in Jackson, Ohio, had a severe flashback. So he got arrested and taken to Jackson County Jail. And he kept asking them to send him to the VA. And the deputy sheriff, you know how powerful they are, just told him, no, you're not going to VA. So they finally just put him out on the street. His girlfriend had jilted him. He went down in front of her pizza parlor where she worked, killed himself. I blame that on the sheriff's department. I blame that on the judges who sit by and let stuff like that happen. Because all they had to do was call the VA in Chillicothe and got him transferred down there. They could afford the gasoline in one of those cruisers. Or they could have called some veteran organization and say, can you take this guy to Chillicothe? But they didn't do that. They put him right out the street, and he went right out and committed suicide in front of his girlfriend. I've had 10 of my clients commit suicide. And the very first one was in Columbus back in '78. And he had a flashback. PTSD was not on the map then. They called it anxiety neurosis, adult situational reaction, right out of DSM-2. And he had this terrible flashback and grabbed his shotgun and ran out into a field off Kimberly Parkway in Columbus, and people saw him, and he was screaming, and he dug a foxhole, and he was screaming that the VC weren't going to take him alive. So they called the police. The police sent the SWAT team wearing combat uniforms. You know how they like to play like they're real combat people? They could be dressed in yellow tops and blue jeans and get the same job done with the equipment they have. They didn't have to come after him wearing what the VC wore in Vietnam, but they did. So when they started yelling at him, put down his weapon, he did. He put it right up underneath his chin and pulled the trigger. Same thing could have happened in Portsmouth last Saturday, but the Veterans Service Commission office found out what was going on and ran out and told the police this is a combat veteran. He had barricaded himself in his apartment and was shooting 20-some rounds through his door. But they got him, and he's alive, and they got him up at the VA. Now they got to get him treated. He's 100% disabled veteran anyway. So Audie Murphy was the most decorated soldier in the history of the United States, and he spent a large part of his fortune lobbying the VA to recognize the condition we call post-traumatic stress disorder, because they did not have a good program then. But he died in an airplane crash, so all that ended. But PTSD's bad. Audie Murphy had it so bad that he slept with a loaded .45 caliber Colt under his pillow every night. PTSD, unfortunately, is not recognized by a whole lot of providers, even in the VA system, which is very irritating, because PTSD is a very damning condition. It just eats your soul from inside and out, and it causes marriages to dissolve. Just wives say, or husbands now, if you don't quit having those nightmares, you got to leave. And I know, because that happened to me. And it's not a good thing. And when it's not properly treated, it's worse. And then when you have a veteran that goes before these specialists at the VA for the compensation hearing for the evaluation, you got one in Huntington and one in Chillicothe. No matter how valorous or what the symptoms are, a veteran doesn't have PTSD. That claim's automatically lost, because the examiner has the final say. The examiner can see the veteran for 2 hours and override 10 years of treatment. It's just like I mentioned earlier about those records being burned, and it's automatic denial because you don't have any evidence. The same thing happens with PTSD. You got to take care of your warrior. You can be a wounded warrior and never see a scratch on a guy because he's wounded or she's wounded in their mind. And it's tragic, and it's downright sickening. And we had a woman that was a 3-star general in charge of medical about 8 or 9 years ago, who ordered her medical staff not to diagnose PTSD, but to diagnose personality disorder, which would save the government a lot of money. And she finally got removed from office. We banged on her on military.com like she was a drum. Then we had a woman down in Texas by the name of Dr. Perez, a female, who sent an email to all her clinicians to diagnose personality disorder instead of PTSD, and then the veteran could appeal it. Well, in the VA system, one thing you cannot appeal is a medical decision. You can appeal anything else you want. You can appeal any claim you want. You may not have any case, and it may go the way of Fat Sam, which many of them do, but you can appeal it. But you cannot appeal a medical decision. And when you have Army generals, 3-star, and VA psychologists who are telling their people to diagnose a personality disorder, which cannot be service-connected under any condition, by the way, that saved the VA a lot of money. Before I boom on the VA too hard on that, I will say for the service-connected veteran who is 30, 50, and above, they get regular VA health care. Pretty good. They call in and say, I got this, that, or the other thing, and they get fairly well taken care of. For the non-service connected veteran, and a non-service connected veteran could be a veteran who just came back from Afghanistan wearing the Medal of Honor around his neck and all the other medals that go with it. If he hadn't filed a claim yet, what is he? Non-service connected. Now, if he's got the Medal of Honor and the Purple Heart, they're going to recognize the Purple Heart as automatic treatment. That's the only medal the VA recognizes that gives you automatic treatment. The Purple Heart. Not the Medal of Honor, not the Navy Cross, not the Distinguished Service Cross. Purple Heart. VA health care for the average veteran who's not 30, 50, or above % disabled for a service-connected condition, the health care can be quite trying. like I said, I've told you before, my chest started bothering me and I got this cough back in July. So I would go over to the VA clinic, and I'm a non-service connected veteran. I never got shot, I never got hit, I got scared to death, and I ended up with PTSD, but I didn't file a claim on it then and won't now. But the thing is, I'm not service connected, so I'd go in the clinic and she'd say, well, you got an appointment in April, which I do. We're talking about I was in there in July. Got a cough. Well, I can get the nurse to call you. What am I supposed to do? Put the telephone on my chest so they could hear what's going on in there? No. When I said that to them, they got kind of offended. But I'd already left, ambulance, and I worked in that clinic. So I went back numerous times in July, August, and then in September it got so bad that I had to go to the urgent care, and they immediately sent me to the emergency room because my right lung had collapsed. I have pleurisy, and then they did some more exams, and my heart, because of this, has changed locations from the left side to the right side. It moved about 3 or 4 inches. I forgot what the doctor said it moved. But anyway, I couldn't get health care. Now, do I hold everybody in the VA responsible for that? No. It's just amazing how that the federal government can take a simple issue and twist it all out of shape. And when people have these events happen to them while they're on active duty, the government should be responsible for it. It's just like people come back with lost limbs. Why should it take 18 months to get a claim approved? The claim specialist looks at the application. Veteran says, lost both legs below the knee when my helicopter was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. Then all that the rating specialist would have to do is look into that veteran's service medical records, and it says right there, service member was treated for loss of legs below the knee. It should be approved immediately. Maybe 1 or 2 days to get it all entered into the computer in a check. And there's no sense in them putting veterans so far on the back burner that over the years since I was a young person, it seems like the VA has always been behind. And the VA, I remember way back, used to brag how they were the largest employer of veterans in the federal government. Almost 1/3 of their employees were veterans. Well, duh. Why aren't 2/3 of their employees veterans? Yeah. You have people that work claims that are absolutely oblivious to the facts. I had a veteran who, they sent him back a letter stating he had to prove that he had more than 90 days active duty, and we sent the DD-214 in, and the guy had the combat infantry badge and a Purple Heart, and it was written on his DD-214. So in my loving way, I called him and let him know in simple English, what is going on? You got the guy's DD-214 listed as evidence on your letter, and you're wanting him to prove that he was on active duty more than 90 days? And the person I called in Cleveland agreed, and they got that squared away. But unfortunately, a lot of claims fall into the hands of people who really use delay tactics, as we spoke of earlier. And they come out with those duty to assist letters, and they sent those out by the millions, which would delay the claim. The VA assumes that every veteran knows everything about what they filed for, which is not true. And the VA has attorneys and specialists that are trained, highly trained, to work on claims and getting their objectives, and then they expect some guy or gal who just got back from Afghanistan to know everything they know. It doesn't make sense. First thing you need to do is, before you file a claim, is gather as much evidence as you can. Because if you can file a fully developed claim, that will help you immensely. The second thing to do is sit down and list every person that you served with that you can remember their name, and try to remember where they're from. I run into this all the time. Guys will come in and see me, and I say, well, who did you serve with? Well, I don't remember any of them. How can that possibly be that you served with people for 2 or 3 years and you don't remember a single one of them's name? Well, I just don't. Well, it's just your claim. You need, and I give them a paper. It tells them to list everybody, who they ate with, who they ran around with, who their friends were. And when people try to tell me that, well, I never knew anybody's last name, it throws up a big red flag.
Yeah.
Because very few people were called by their superiors by their first name or their nickname. They called them by their last name. Lambert or Barker. That's how they did it. And I can understand a lot of guys not knowing the first name of Mr. Lambert or Mr. Barker, but they could at least come up with, they had a nickname, his name was Mike or Buzz or Pete or whatever, and you can still track it down. People need to list everybody they served with, and you need names. How can you serve in a unit that long and forget the people? So that's what I do. I tell them to get their names down on paper, because I will need them. Also, where did you go? What did you do when you got there? That helps you locate people too. Especially today we have the internet. And I've had guys actually tell me they couldn't remember the name of the unit they were in before they got into the unit they were discharged from. I have to order their service records then, and that's an additional several months. So what people can do is get all their ducks in order and make the information accessible. And then when they get out, they go to the doctor. They need to list every doctor that wasn't in the VA system that they saw, and where they saw that doctor and what it was for. Most doctors destroy medical records after 7 years, which makes it difficult, but some don't, and some doctors might actually remember events. So we need all that information. Then your family members that knew you when you went over and knew you when you came back. Their opinions can be vital, especially on, quote, buddy statements. But the real buddy statements are the guys and gals you served with on active duty, and they're important. So that's what I try to get everybody to do up front. So when an outside doctor writes a statement in support of a veteran, they need to word it exactly. And I'll quote, "In my professional medical opinion, the cause of the patient's condition is due to the injury the patient received while on active duty," and give the date. They get staff angry with them.
Yeah.
And staff has the ultimate power to really mess you up if they want to. A lot of times, a lot of veterans will go in and see a provider or the support staff, and they're irritable, and the support staff may not know the cause of it, and the provider may not, and they just react to it. Then on the other hand, your better providers will say, well, what's wrong with you today, Dennis? Why are you so irritable? Tell me. And after usually a couple of questions and a few words, the veteran will tell them. And that separates the outstanding providers from the average or below average. You got to remember, if you go into a room of 50 doctors, 25 of them graduated in the lower half of their class.
Yeah.
And the same it is with providers. If you go into a room with 25 providers, either 12 or 11 of those providers are below average. It just depends. So this is the things we got to look at when we're dealing with the VA. And again, a lot of clerical personnel are veterans. I know quite a few are, but a whole lot more are not.
Yeah.
And they usually have less tolerance with the veteran than those that served. Well, I've watched veterans rebuild their lives. I've watched veterans try to recapture their objectives. And when it comes to medical care, a lot of veterans have been able to get tremendous providers and get a grasp on their life and save their lives. VA does a lot of good things for a lot of veterans. And sometimes we dwell on the negative, but the positive's there. And like I said, the service-connected veteran usually gets a lot better service than a non-service connected veteran because of priority issues. You know, I'm not service connected, I'm priority group 8. And according to the VA, I have all the money just to go see any doctor on the outside I want to, which is not true, but it's practical. I've got insurance, so my insurance will pay a lot of it. But the VA does a real good job on their service-connected veterans when it comes to health care.
As long as they can get that service connection.
Yep, and it's hard to do. It's hard to do when you got a guy or a gal coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan that lost a leg or 2 legs, in one case I know. And they automatically get in the system by being a OIF or OEF vet. But somebody else that served in the same period that didn't have that traumatic experience and did not go to Iraq but were stationed like at Dover Air Force Base, they don't even get health care unless they've got over 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's sad.